Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Justice Powered by Information and Action webinar series presented by the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. Today's discussion, we will look back on the year that was and the year ahead in criminal justice policy and the death penalty, with representatives from the legal activist community and the media in what we hope will be an educational and motivating dialogue. This webinar series is brought to you by the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, which for 42 years has been a leader in building the U.S. movement to abolish the death penalty. NCADP operates on two distinct tracks: our litigation technical assistance, which provides defense legal teams, ensure we help lawyers prevent death sentences and save lives. As you know, reducing death sentences gives state legislatures and courts the grounds to abolish the death penalty. We also provide our Justice Powered by Information and Action webinar series. These webinars mobilize informed grassroots actions to help abolish the death penalty in favor of humane criminal justice systems that actually save lives. Please stick around to the end of the webinar, where we will be giving you ways on how you can stay engaged and use your voice to help abolish the death penalty. Now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel for this afternoon's webinar. Monica Reid is the Director of Advocacy for the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, where she coordinates NACDL's efforts to mobilize individuals and groups in support of their policy objectives. The NACDL's mission is to serve as a leader alongside diverse coalitions in identifying and reforming flaws and inequities in the criminal justice system and readdressing systemic racism and ensuring that its members and others in the criminal defense bar are fully equipped to serve all their accused persons at the highest level. And Alan Prendergast, who has been writing for Denver's Westword for over 30 years. He teaches journalism at Colorado College. His stories about criminal justice, historic crimes, high security prisons, and death by misadventure have won numerous awards and has appeared in a wide range of magazines and anthologies. He is the author of The Poison Tree, a true story of family and violence revenge. I'd like to welcome both Alan and Monica to our webinar.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start off, we actually do have a national criminal justice policy, which is being debated today in the U.S. Senate. The First Step Act, which would reform the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, ease mandatory minimums, and increase good time credits. And that's on the federal level. But Monica, there is a lot of criminal justice work being done at the state level. Can you tell us about the NACDL State Criminal Justice Network and how it seeks to communicate and provide resources to those committed to the fight for criminal justice reform?
Sure, no problem. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So just a little bit of background. So NACDL obviously is a national organization, but we have state affiliates in almost all of the 50 states in Washington, D.C. So our relationship in the State Criminal Justice Network is really an avenue to foster relationships with, one, our state affiliates, and also with state-based criminal justice organizations. And so the network basically is a listserv. It doesn't require to be a member of NACDL. It doesn't require that you be a criminal defense lawyer. We have advocates from all backgrounds, and so it's really open. So this is one of the only listservs that we have that we host that is open to non-members. So that's something important to remember. So as you kind of mentioned, it does provide a medium exchange for ideas, strategies. We really use it as a way for people to share ideas. And so, for example, if there's an issue taking place in one state, clean slate is one issue. And so, if you're working on this issue and you have a question, say, hey, have you in your states have dealt with this issue? What were the strongest support points, where were the opposition points, and how you can kind of strategize around that. That's really what we see the State Criminal Justice Network serving as. So really a medium to exchange ideas. Every month we produce a newsletter, and so these are issues that we've seen on the rise. It could be issues that we're working on personally as an association. We also, as a resource, we track almost 30 or so different criminal justice issues. And so, outside of the main ones in sentencing and drug law reform, we track, forfeiture. We do a lot around recording interrogations, criminal discovery, just to name a few. I mean, there's a lot. Policing, bail reform. There's definitely 30 different issues. And so we do track those, one, so that we're aware, and then two, to provide a resource for those who may not be able to have those type of tracking software. So that's something that is publicly available on our website and that we share via these newsletters and the State Criminal Justice Network. In terms of other resources, again, these are available to our state affiliates, but also just partner organizations. So if you want to engage NACDL at the state level on your particular criminal justice issue, you will become a partner organization, and these resources are available to you as well. And so in addition to the monthly newsletter and getting access to our listserv, you can also request expert witness funds from us. And so this is kind of a pot of money that we have where we can help state advocates bring in experts to testify in a particular state issue. So that is available by application for our partner organizations at the state level. As I mentioned, the state legislative tracking, the monthly newsletters, we do have an action alert platform. And so we can automate legislative action alerts at the state level, the federal level, that can target particular areas, a legislator, or particular city or town. So that's available as well. And then overall kind of coalition building, I think for our partners and our affiliates, we're coming in and helping on a state campaign. Whatever you kind of need from us, we're able to be flexible and moldable. And sometimes we do provide coalition building if the needs arise at the state level. So we really use the State Criminal Justice Network as a way to share state criminal justice issues, allow advocates to get information from other states. You can see what advocates in one state is doing, what's worked well for them, what hasn't, and kind of really strategize and help you kind of mold your state criminal justice campaigns.
Great, thank you. And you can find out more about the State Criminal Justice Network at their website, nacdl.org. And remember, please stick around to the end of the webinar where we're going to be giving you a few ways that you can keep your voice involved and make your voice heard in efforts to abolish the death penalty. And please, for those who are joining us on the chat, feel free to send your questions in to Alan and Monica, and we'll get them read. I'd like to say hello to Linda Fox from Death Penalty Focus in San Francisco, Jacqueline Lansman, who's coming in from Washington, D.C., and all the people who are joining us today. Alan, Monica was talking about some of the great state work that's going on. The governor-elect of Colorado, Jared Polis, he ran on a platform that included death penalty repeal. And he signified that if the legislature sends him a death penalty repeal bill, he will sign it. Now, how do you assess the prospects of the Colorado legislature actually passing such a bill? And what constituencies do you see as major opposition to the death penalty repeal bill? Is it the legislature? Is it the law enforcement, other advocacy groups? Talk to us about what's going on death penalty-wise in Colorado.
Sure. Well, Colorado is one of those states that has a death penalty that's been dysfunctional for forever. We've executed one person in the last 50 years. That was over 20 years ago, and he was basically a volunteer in the sense that he waived a lot of his appeals. It's almost impossible to get the death penalty here, so it's sort of like an old bowling trophy you keep around for sentimental reasons or something. I don't know. It's gathering dust. It's in the way. To actually repeal it, though, for some reason or another, has not happened. And in fact, we've been here before. About 10 years ago, the legislature came within one vote of repealing the death penalty. They may have that vote now. I think there are some other considerations. This is a governor who's had this was a big blue tide that came up in Colorado this year. And I think there's a little wariness about moving too swiftly. The last time we had this kind of blue tide, there was significant legislative action on gun control, and the end result was two of the legislators who had backed those bills got recalled. So there was a backlash to the sense of maybe going too far too fast. I'll be curious to see if the legislature actually brings something to the governor this year. It may not happen this year, but I think it's definitely on the table. Particularly since there's really no defense for what we have. I mean, the James Holmes trial about 4 years ago, this is the Aurora theater shootings, they could not give him the death penalty. If you can't do it in that case, I don't know when you will. There's clearly a racial bias in the fact that we have 3 people on death row who are all African-American men who come from the exact same high school. So there's like one jurisdiction in Colorado that has managed to achieve the last 3 death penalty convictions, and none of those are anywhere near to happening. So there are strong arguments to get rid of it, and then we may in fact be on the verge of doing that. I think there is this possibility of some caution.
You're referring to the fact that both houses of the legislature are now controlled by Democrats and the executive branch as well. So.
Right. And you know, I mean, there is some motivation there. I think there is going to be opposition. You asked what kind of opposition. These days, I think it's mainly coming from law enforcement, although not always directly from law enforcement. There's what I would call the victim lobby, which is it's not as monolithic as it seems. I mean, there are a lot of people who are victims' families and interested in restorative justice and other alternatives to the death penalty. But the one that gets the support and the funding through law enforcement assistance grants tends to be the group that is very visible and that comes out whenever there's an effort to repeal the death penalty. And I expect we'll see those folks again. The question is whether there can be enough of a coalition of support for repeal that would also include some victim groups and could actually achieve this.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. You know, in the area of state work that the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers is focused on, what states should we be looking at? Are there any certain developments in certain states that you'd like to highlight for our audience, Monica?
Sure. So we, utilizing kind of our state tracking, will kind of foresee where we kind of target in terms of states, especially in upcoming sessions. And we take a lot of cue from our state affiliates, as I mentioned before. So where there may be work that they're doing and they need the input of a national group such as ourselves, we will kind of weigh in. But there are particular issues that we will focus on no matter what kind of is upcoming in terms of criminal justice issues. And one obviously is public defense. That's obviously a big one for us. And then obviously restoration of rights as well. And so alleviating the collateral consequences of an arrest or conviction are very important to us. And those will be issues, those are the type of issues that we'll work on. No matter what the political landscape is, we will always be kind of working in those areas. In terms of restoration of rights, I do want to highlight a report that we had released back in 2014. It's still very relevant, given the work and the bills that we're seeing in the legislatures. And so in 2014, we released a report called Collateral Damage, and it basically outlined the issues of all of the collateral consequences of an arrest or conviction. We had a task force that had hearings around the country in about 7 or 8 different cities and really got feedback from advocates on the ground in terms of how these collateral consequences are impacting those with a conviction. And so the report kind of outlines a set of recommendations, obviously kind of seeking to mitigate the use of collateral consequences unless it's extremely necessary or directly related to the crime. But we really do not advocate for the use of collateral consequences. And so from that report and the work that we do at the state level, we're always looking to support legislation that are going to provide some level of relief. So for example, voting rights, restoring voting rights for those with felony convictions, banning the box, making sure that the use of that, the checkbox on applications is at the very last step of the application process so that people have a chance of getting their foot in the door, providing relief in terms of fair chance licensing. And so having a mechanism where people with a criminal conviction can not have that conviction impact their ability to get a license. So some level of relief on that as well. And so we've seen a lot of those bills, I think in the past year, definitely in 2018, we saw a lot of fair chance licensing. We're always seeing a lot of restoration of rights. So opportunities to provide for expanded expungement and sealing. I think I mentioned the clean slate a bill. So in Pennsylvania, for example, they actually just passed a clean slate bill that would expand their expungement eligibility. And so issues such as that and bills such as that are things that we're looking to support on the restoration of rights front. In terms of public defense, so we're always looking to bolster our public defender offices and our public defenders across the country. Our membership is not just private counsel, but also public defenders. And so we're always committed to making sure that our public defense systems in states are highly effective and able to provide the effective assistance of counsel that's guaranteed by our Constitution. So we have a public defense team, a whole team that's kind of dedicated to this one particular issue that goes around the country, training public defenders, making sure that they are well equipped and well able to provide effective counsel to their clients. And we also engage in a lot of reform work. And so where it makes sense, where it's applicable, we'll do a lot of legislative or systemic reform. I want to highlight one state that we are doing that in, and that's Indiana. And so back in 2015, we actually commissioned an organization called the Sixth Amendment Center to do a report in Indiana to study their public defender system. Over, I think, the next year, they did that report. They released a report in 2016, kind of outlined some of the systemic issues that they saw. Then the State Public Defender Commission formed a task force to study public defense and kind of really further study some of the issues that the report highlighted. And so I think this is about 2016, 2017 now. And so over the year 2017 through 2018, the task force kind of went around the state, had a number of listening tours, focus groups to really hone in on what the issues are and how they can bring about some systemic change. And this is going to be via legislation. And so one of the things that we're looking to, and what we'll foresee for 2019, is really kind of working with their Public Defender Commission, our affiliates in that state, and obviously individual public defenders and defense attorneys in that state to bring about some of the legislative reforms that they're trying to institute in that state. One is providing reimbursement for misdemeanor cases. And so right now, counties that participate in the Public Defender Commission and get reimbursement or only get reimbursement for felony cases. And so they're going to be seeking some legislative changes to provide for misdemeanor reimbursement, as well as stating up a statewide appellate office in that state. So those are kind of some of the bigger recommendations, but there are several others. But that's just one example of kind of the public defense work that we're doing across the country.
Well, you don't hear this every day, but all eyes on Indiana. So we'll keep an eye out on the user state and see what's going on there. Of course, if you're following us and watching us, please feel free to send a question on the chat, and we'll get it over to either Monica or Alan. Alan, let's go back to Colorado for a second, and let's talk about mass incarceration, which I believe the legacy, if I'm wrong, can be traced back to 1985 when the legislature passed a bill that doubled all felony sentences, causing the prison population to double over the next 5 years. Is Colorado looking to reverse this trend and end mass incarceration? A new transformational vision for community health and safety exists in the state?
I don't know if there's any kind of overarching vision. There certainly have been efforts to address the consequences of this sort of mindless mandatory sentencing. Certainly in area, you can point to certain areas and say, okay, Colorado's one of the states that has legalized marijuana, and one of the concomitants of that has been a reduction in some of the drug sentencing structures. Within the prison system, there's been quite a bit of attention to the issues around solitary confinement and the need for more mental health programs. Some of this comes out of the murder of the Department of Corrections chief here a few years ago by an individual who had just gotten out of prison, was a parole absconder, and had spent years in solitary. And ironically, the person that he killed was the one who was attempting to reform the degree to which Colorado used solitary, which was excessive a few years ago. Now they claim to have done away with solitary. In some cases, I think this is rebranding, but there clearly is an effort to reduce the amount of time people are spending in solitary and to start looking at reentry issues in a more serious way. And a lot of this push has come from within the correction system itself. It has not been legislated per se. But I know there are legislative efforts underway to look at ways to, further deal with some of these harsher sentencing schemes. At 6 years after the Supreme Court ruled that you can't have mandatory life sentences for juveniles without parole, we're finally getting around to releasing some of those juvenile lifers who have spent 20 or 30 years in prison. I interviewed a guy the other day who went in 1994 at the age of 17. You can imagine what it's like coming out in today's world. There was no internet. He's got a cell phone. He's got to learn all this stuff about Facebook. He's got to get a job. It's like a time capsule, and these people need a lot of programs. I think that's becoming very apparent. So,
are there resources in the prison system for people like that? Are there educational and job training? Is there
yeah, they say they have that, and I think they do have some programs. I'm not sure that all of them are as relevant as they need to be. There's all sorts of reentry hurdles. Some of this is the way the parole system is set up. Colorado has a system of private, for-profit halfway houses, which when you come out of prison, you would customarily be in one of these places for a while. And there's a high failure rate of those because of some of the conditions that are imposed. So trying to clear out some of these obstacles, some of the things that Monica mentioned are also being talked about here, banning the box, finding ways to get people readily into employment and have the skills and resources they need so they're not just in a revolving door.
Right, Monica, I've got a question for you from our audience. Jacqueline from Washington, D.C. wants to know an example of a case that you or the organization are currently working
on. Well, I'm not sure she needs my case because we are not a law firm, although our members are defense attorneys. So I'm going to assume she might mean state campaign. So I'll answer it from that angle. So one particular one I want to highlight in Virginia. So forgive me, this is kind of maybe a more nuanced legal issue, but it's something that's very important to our members, and that's criminal discovery reform. So in Virginia, and this is the process where kind of defense attorneys and prosecutors exchange information before a trial. And so if your client's arrested, there's a police report, there's, the state has presumably talked to witnesses, interviewed witnesses and the victim, and they have that information. And this is supposedly where that information is then passed on to the defense attorney. And so in Virginia and some other states that are considered more closed states, this information is very restricted as opposed to more open file discovery states. And so, for example, in Virginia and some other states, defendants aren't entitled to a police report. They're not entitled to the witness list or the witness list before trial. And so their attorney is kind of really crippled, I would say, in terms of what information they have before trial. And a lot of times this is referred to trial by ambush in Virginia, and so I'm sure some other similar states. And so this information not being entitled, sometimes, plea deals are negotiated even before trial, and they do not have this information to say. They have no information in terms of what the state has against their client in terms of how strong the case is or not. And you're at the stage where you have to make decisions on a plea agreement or not, or to go to trial not knowing what the state has. Has on your client. And so this is very disconcerting in terms of how defense attorneys are able to, properly represent their clients and the information that you should be entitled to, for example, as simple as a police report. And so in Virginia, there has been many, I would say, non-legislative ways they were trying to go about reforming their criminal discovery rules. We got involved in 2015, so it's really been kind of a multi-year state campaign. We got involved in 2015. At this time, their state Supreme Court had convened their own special committee to study discovery. The committee produced a set of recommendations to reform criminal discovery in Virginia, and took public comment over a course of a few months. And then I think this could have been November of 2015, Supreme Court released an opinion saying that they would not be accepting any of the recommendations of the special committee. At this point, this is kind of where our affiliate and some of our members kind of brought us in and updated us on what was going on. After that, we decided, at this point, we were going to the legislature in terms of seeking these reforms. So I would say over the course of the year, the first year that we had legislation was in 2017, and then also in 2018. But kind of laying the groundwork with that is a lot of really community engagement. And so outside of, and bringing in other organizations. And so outside outside of just, NACDL, our state affiliate, VACDL, and some other criminal defense organizations. We were really looking to pull in other criminal justice organizations, so groups who are doing criminal justice reform, but not specifically on criminal discovery. So a lot of, ACA was one that was already kind of working a little bit. So, but working with them, another group, New Virginia Majority, a lot of kind of state-based groups who are doing criminal justice, but not on this issue. So educating them on the issue, why they should be concerned about it, why they should be engaged in it. And so this is where we did a lot of the coalition building that I was speaking to earlier. And so really building a coalition that's not just criminal defense attorneys and practitioners, but really building it out, letting what would be our audience, which is legislators, know that this is an issue that impacts a broad range of people, and a lot of people are concerned about. And so kind of fast forwarding. So like I said, 2017, that was the first year that we had legislation. We sought out a sponsor, criminal defense attorney by practice, sat on the relevant committees in that state Senate, and kind of looked to put the recommendations of the special committee in a legislative form that we sought to get passed. And so the first year we were very successful in terms of getting it out of the state Senate, so one of the houses. And then a little bit of background. I'm from Virginia, so I'm really aware of the legislator down there. So it helps a little bit. So I already knew we were going to have an issue in our house, and any Virginians know that the House of Delegates is a tough chamber. But we were successful in the Senate. It passed 39-1 in favor. We got to the House, the state, in Virginia, our prosecutors are Commonwealth attorneys. So the state Commonwealth Attorneys Association is very, very powerful. And so by the time it went to the House, there was a lot of organized opposition. And so it didn't, pass further from there. But we did have a lot of momentum in terms of it getting out of the Senate. And by the near unanimous vote that it received, kind of fast forwarding. So after this kind of success, and one of the things that really helped us, so one of the House members that sits on the House Court of Justice Committee particularly said to the prosecutors who were in the room that this is an issue that needs to be worked on, and all groups and all parties need to come to the table to look at reform. And so with that kind of statement and mandate from some of the House members, our state bar association formed a discovery task force. And so again, trying to get to a place where both sides can agree on a set of recommendations and reforms. Over the year, this task force met. They had a set of recommendations, again, providing for a lot of reforms. So providing for some of the basic things like police reports, defense, getting access to police reports, you getting the witness list and witness statements, prior to trial, expert witness notice, all of these recommendations that the task force and its members approved unanimously. And so this task force had obviously defense attorneys, it had a lot of the state prosecutors, and had other criminal justice actors on the committee. So theoretically, it was a very diverse group that agreed on these set of recommendations. And with that, the task force took it. We went back to the state Supreme Court for approval. So now, though, we have a broader coalition. So it's not just us, it's a broader coalition of criminal justice actors. We have more state groups engaged. We have more national groups engaged on why we need to reform discovery in Virginia. And so we went to the Supreme Court. This is actually the third time within the past 5 years that the Supreme Court was considering a rule change to the discovery rules in Virginia. We had a lot of more community support. And so we were more organized in terms of the letters of support, making sure that our groups had letters of support, sending them into the state Supreme Court during the public comment period. And I really think that kind of helped us in terms of pushing it over the finishing line. And so we did meet success this third time round. In September of this year, the state Supreme Court approved the rule change. And so Virginia was able to reform their criminal discovery rules. And the new rules will go into effect July 1st of 2019.
That's excellent news coming out of Virginia. Congratulations on that. That's a lot of hard work, a lot of mobilizing, a lot of coalition building, and a lot of false starts in the Supreme Court. Yeah. So congratulations on all that great work out there. Alan, I'm going to give you the last question of the afternoon, if you don't mind. Monica has already told us about the great work that she's done in Virginia and some of the upcoming work going on in Indiana. Let's look forward to 2019 and Is there, outside of possible death penalty repeal in the state of Colorado, are there any other progressive criminal justice policies that could be signed into law, that could be debated? Could the conversation start around something that we should be advocates should be encouraged by?
Well, I think there's a lot to be encouraged by. I think this increasing focus on reentry issues, on trying to eliminate some of the hurdles to reentry, trying to find an alternative to this halfway house system, certainly trying to make the obstacles to employment and decent housing and really a halfway decent chance of making it on the outside. I think people have gotten much more educated about the need for these things, that there isn't just this obliviousness about why parole fails so many times. And there may ultimately be a discussion about whether mandatory parole is required in every circumstance as well. I'm not sure that's going to make the legislature this year, but it's certainly part of the dialogue that's coming out of this.
A lot of good stuff coming on in Colorado as well. And I'm sure that Monica and all of her state advocate networks will be closely watching all of that great legislation that maybe will make its way through the legislature and hopefully perhaps to the governor's desk at some point. I'd like to thank you both for joining us this afternoon. It was a really great conversation. The people who were following us on chat, thank you for sticking around. But like I said before, I wanted to give you a little bit of a little background in terms of what we're going to be doing in terms of calls for action. As you know, part of this webinar series is not just to give you some information so you can mobilize, but also give you some ways that you can act, some ways that you can stay engaged, and some ways that you can use your voice to help abolish the death penalty. Because, here at JPIA, we call you our justice, and we need you to help build a movement to help abolish what is a racist, ineffective, and cruel system that is the death penalty. There are some numerous ways that you can get involved. First way is by sharing these webinars and help build this movement. Sharing these webinars are an important way to kind of build this movement. We've created a special YouTube page. We'll be posting the links into the chat room as we go along. But please visit our YouTube page, and you can see this webinar and all our past webinars. And please share them with your network so people can understand the totality of issues that come under the guise of the death penalty. In the past, we've talked about the Supreme Court in regard to the abolition movement. We've talked about the Pope and his recent conversion of the death penalty in terms of what the Catholic Church is going to be teaching, and a range of issues, whether it's lethal injection and medical ethics, or the parties in Texas that allows people who have not committed crimes, murder, to actually be sentenced to death. So follow us on YouTube, and not only follow us on YouTube, but also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where we can keep you engaged on a daily basis. We'd also love you to donate to NCADP, because your donations will make our work possible. You can donate once at a time, or you can become a monthly torchbearer, and that will be a rotating monthly donation that you can make for us. And again, all of these links will be posted into the chat room, so feel free to take your time and explore all these links. We're also asking you if you could actually join our volunteer national action team. This team is on the front lines of what we call death penalty repeal policy. And over the next couple of months, we're going to be asking people to not only take action on the various legislation and execution alerts, we're also building a network of grassroots promoters in an effort to bring the documentary film In the Executioner's Shadow to your community. And you can sign up or email us at action@ncadp.org. And lastly, we have the governor of California, who is leaving office on January 7th. And there's an opportunity for him to commute all 740 death sentences to life without parole before he leaves his office. If you could call Governor Jerry Brown at 916-445-2841 and remind him that he is against the death penalty, and ask him to commute all 740 death sentences to life without parole. Again, the California Commutation Project asking the governor of California to commute all 740 death sentences to life without parole before he leaves office on January 7th. Call him at 916-445-2841. And this graphic and this information you'll be able to find and share on our Twitter and Facebook page. And please join us next month on January 16th at 3 p.m., where our next Justice Powered by Information and Action webinar presented by the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty will be a special inside VIP briefing by the Death Penalty Information Center and their annual 2018 year-end report. That's January 16th at 3 p.m. Until then, my name is Gregory Joseph. I'd like to thank again Monica and Alan for joining us and all the people on the chat. We will see you in January. Have a happy holiday and keep up the good fight.